Most gardeners completely misunderstand how water moves through their soil, and as a result, they spend half their summer chasing wilted plants and battling uneven irrigation. The common advice you hear, just water deeply once a week or rely on mulch, is misleading if your soil lacks the right structure. Without healthy mycelium networks running through your beds, water isn't retained efficiently, nutrients don't circulate, and your crops suffer during dry spells. I've been experimenting with mushroom mycelium in raised beds, traditional soil, and even hydroponics, and the difference is dramatic. Beds stay consistently moist, your plants are healthier, and you spend less time watering. If you want real results, you need to understand how this works. And before we dive in, make sure you subscribe. This channel is all about practical, no-fluff gardening methods that actually produce food. Most gardeners don't realize mycelium is nature's water retention system. Mushroom mycelium is often dismissed as just fungus, but it's actually a living network of fine threads that run through your soil, connecting roots, breaking down organic matter, and most importantly, moving water where it's needed. Think of it as a microscopic irrigation system. When I first applied mycelium inoculants to my raised beds, I noticed that even during a 2-week heat wave, the top 6 inches of soil stayed moist without extra watering. Traditional advice would have you think that only mulch or drip irrigation can do that, but mycelium literally acts like a sponge and a circulatory system at the same time. You don't need to go full-scale mushroom farming to get these benefits. Some gardeners get intimidated, thinking they need a professional lab or exotic spores. That's unnecessary. I start small. I mix a few tablespoons of mycelium spawn into the top 2 inches of a garden bed when preparing it for planting. For backyard beds, about 4 by 4 feet, I typically use 2 to 3 tablespoons of sawdust-based spawn or 1 to 2 tablespoons of grain spawn per square foot, lightly incorporating it into the soil, along with a thin layer of compost. The idea is to give the mycelium enough organic material to feed on so it establishes quickly. It will naturally seek out plant roots and start forming networks that transport water and nutrients. How to integrate mycelium with raised beds and existing compost. Raised beds benefit even more from mycelium because the soil there dries out faster than in-ground beds. Before planting, I mix a 1:3 ratio of compost to native soil, then sprinkle the mycelium evenly over the top. After lightly raking it in, I water gently to activate the network. Once the plants go in, the mycelium continues to expand, bridging gaps between compost particles and plant roots. In my experience, beds treated this way need 30 to 40% less watering throughout the summer. For larger raised beds, you can also inoculate deeper layers by layering spawn between compost and soil layers. You can use mycelium in hydroponics too, but it requires precision. Hydroponic systems are trickier because excess mycelium growth can clog pumps if you're not careful. I've found the best approach is to inoculate media like coconut coir or a soilless mix with a very small amount of spawn, usually just a teaspoon per 10 litres of media. The mycelium doesn't overtake the system, but improves moisture retention and nutrient distribution significantly. You'll notice roots seem to cling to coir better, and the plants handle dry-down cycles without stress. Why this works better than mulch alone. Mulch is great for reducing evaporation, but it doesn't actually move water to roots. Mycelium does. I've had situations where beds mulched heavily still needed daily watering during heat waves, but beds inoculated with mycelium maintained even moisture levels. The fungal network literally pulls water from wetter areas and distributes it where roots need it. That's why experienced gardeners see healthier yields and fewer stressed plants when mycelium is part of the system. Monitoring and optimizing your compost for mycelium success. If you're serious about integrating mycelium, you need to understand how your compost and soil temperature affect growth. I rely on the Wilted 20-inch backyard compost thermometer, which I've linked in the description. It's incredibly precise and helps me track whether my compost pile or amended beds are in the ideal temperature range for fungal activity. I check the pile regularly. Steady warmth between 100 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit accelerates decomposition and promotes robust mycelium growth. Without a thermometer, you're basically guessing whether conditions are optimal, which is why many gardeners fail to see results even when adding mycelium. Here are some practical tips for applying mycelium in real gardens. I've found that applying mycelium during planting is ideal, but you can also introduce it mid-season if your beds are drying out. Just sprinkle spawn over the soil surface, lightly water, and top with a thin layer of compost or mulch. Avoid using fungicides and be mindful of overwatering at first. The mycelium needs moisture, but also oxygen. In sandy soils, I'll mix spawn with a bit of composted manure to improve water retention and give the fungi something to feed on. In heavier clay soils, the mycelium helps break up compaction and creates microchannels that improve drainage, while still keeping the soil moist where plants need it. You'll start seeing effects within weeks. It doesn't take months to notice changes. In my raised beds, leafy greens and root crops begin to look consistently hydrated within 2 to 3 weeks. Even during heat waves, I see less wilting and better root development. Plants seem less stressed, which, honestly, translates to faster growth and higher yields. I've tested this over 3 summers, and the results are repeatable whether you're growing tomatoes, peppers, lettuce, or even cucumbers in hydroponic setups. Let's talk about correcting some common myths about mycelium and water retention. Some gardening guides suggest that mushroom mycelium only benefits decomposition and has little to do with water. That's just wrong. Fungal hyphae absorb water and transfer it through the network, effectively acting like capillaries. Others claim you need to inoculate every plant individually. In reality, a light, even spread across the bed, is sufficient. Over-applying can actually create imbalances and increase nitrogen competition, so really less is more. Now, integrating this approach with traditional watering and compost is pretty straightforward. Even with mycelium, you'll still water, just much less. I schedule irrigation when I check the compost thermometer and observe soil moisture. This allows me to maintain consistent hydration without overwatering. In raised beds, I combine a base layer of compost and a thin mulch layer on top, which protects the fungal network while reducing surface evaporation. If you're doing container gardening, a small amount of spawn mixed into the potting media can cut watering needs by about 1/3. Here's the payoff: healthier plants, consistent yields, and less work. The true benefit of using mycelium in your garden is not just water savings. It's healthier, more resilient plants that produce consistently. I've harvested tomatoes, beans, and root crops from beds treated with mycelium, and the difference is clear. Less stress, stronger stems, and better flavor. Hydroponic systems see improved water efficiency, and soil-based gardens handle heat and drought cycles far better than untreated beds. If you're ready to take your garden to the next level, integrating mycelium is one of the simplest yet most effective techniques you can apply. Combine it with careful compost monitoring. Using a tool like the Wilted 20-inch backyard compost thermometer, there's a link in the description. Maintain good organic matter and watch your water needs drop while plant performance improves. You don't need complicated equipment, just a consistent approach and respect for the fungal network doing the heavy lifting in your soil. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because every week we break down methods that actually produce food, not just theoretical tips. And if you found this video helpful, share it with other gardeners who want to grow smarter, not harder. Mycelium isn't magic, it's biology, and applied the right way, it will keep your beds hydrated, healthy, and productive all summer long.